Number 10. King Edward VIII. Directly after his father died in 1936, King Edward VIII took the throne, right? That's pretty normal. But the tides quickly turned when, less than a year later, he renounced his position. Now, this was of course a huge scandal right off the bat. This is not something that's taken lightly in the royal family. Turns out the woman responsible for stealing his heart was that of Wallis Simpson, America's socialite who had already been divorced once before and was at this point working through her second divorce. So you can only imagine how everybody reacted at that point, right? Oh, how dare she? His proposal to Simpson, of course, caused social and political backlash. The Church of England wasn't so chill with Edward marrying someone who had already been divorced. Yeah, they're not really okay with that. So Edward was forced to abdicate. Yeah, he had to, right, for love. Edward and Simpson then tied the knot in 1937, and they stayed together until Edward's death much later in 1972. Sliding into royal DMs right off the hop. Okay, we're in for a treat. Number 9. Dark predictions. Of course, in recent years, the royal family has seen a change that many didn't really expect. When Harry and Meghan chose to renounce their royalty status, speculation began that this could be the beginning of the end for the monarchy. People only fueled their fire with questions. And also, somebody may have called it. Yeah, Nostradamus, he may have predicted this entire event. One of his predictions literally reads, "At the end of the war, the great powers change. Near the coast are born 3 beautiful children. They will ruin the town when they come of age, they will change the kingdom, and they will not see it grow anymore." Now, Harry is only one of 2 children, so I'm not sure if the, quote was talking about him and his siblings, or if it has more to do so with some other royal family members, but either way, there's some people who take Nostradamus' words very, very seriously out there, so I had to include it. Maybe there's something there, I don't know, maybe there's something we haven't quite breaking down yet. That's why we need National Treasure 3, maybe this is the plot. Number 8, King Henry II. While we're on the topic of him, could Nostradamus have actually predicted the death of King Henry II? Because if he did, that's pretty curious, I'd say. Never used the word curious in my life, but I'm like, you know what, that's curious. King Henry II was actually a personal acquaintance of the prophet himself. That'd be kind of cool, being friends with Nostradamus. I'd be like, hey, how does Game of Thrones end? Please. While at one point in history, Nostradamus was seen addressing King Henry II as the most invincible King Henry of France, unfortunately Henry proved to be quite vincible when he met his gruesome death, might I add, at age 40. Yeah, in the summer of 1559, not a great time. A terrible jousting accident went wrong and it left the king passing away shortly after from sepsis. This is a terrible story, but I have to explain because, it's history and, well, that's what we're here for. The jousting accident saw the king having splinters driven into his eye and then his skull as well by one of his young soldiers. And the Nostradamus quote reads, "The young lion will overcome the older one. It says he will pierce his eyes through a golden cage." Okay, already we're a little bit spooky. "And that 2 wounds will ensure a cruel death." So I'm not saying he predicted it, I'm just saying, kind of nailed it. Number 7, Robert Curtos. The eldest son of William the Conqueror, Robert, aka Robert Curtos. Curtos meaning small stocking in French, nicknamed by his father. He was in line as the oldest boy, but untimely denied claim to the throne and kingdom of England. He was prone to laziness and weakness of character apparently, and in 1077, Robert pulled his first dethroning against his father as the result of a prank from his younger brothers William Rufus and Henry, who dumped a chamber pot over his head. Yeah, Robert was pissed, and when King William did literally nothing about it, the next day Robert led a rebellion against the king. Yeah, I mean I would too, right? A full toilet dumped on your head and dad doesn't do anything? Dad! In 1087, King died of wounds from a riding accident and was to divide the dominions between his 2 eldest sons. To Robert, he granted the Duchy of Normandy, and to William Rufus, he granted England. After 2 of the brothers then died, guess who wandered back for the whole throne? Robert. Number 6, George Plantagenet. The 6th son of Richard Plantagenet, the 3rd Duke of York. He played an important role in the struggle between rival factions of the Plantagenets, known as the War of the Roses. A member of the House of York, he then switched sides to support the Lancastrians before reverting back to the Yorkists. Dude, pick a side, will ya? The second of 3 sons, he was always potential for the crown. His father died in 1460, and a year after, his elder brother Edward became King of England and Edward IV, making George now Duke of Clarence. Clarence was imprisoned in the Tower of London and put on trial for treason against his brother Edward. Edward himself prosecuted his brother, declaring that he was guilty of unnatural, loathly treasons aggravated by loyalty and love. Conspiring against your own older brother? Crimes of love and loyalty, huh? Sounds like a great rap album. Number 4, Aristobulus I.
the first Hasmonean king of Judea, the eldest of 5 sons of John, Hyrcanus. Aristobulus is Greek meaning best advising. Well, not really sure if that name fits, because apparently as to the directions of King Hyrcanus, the country was to be placed in the hands of his wife, and Aristobulus was originally to receive the high priest title only. Aristobulus became both king and high priest, selfish much. So much that he had his mother placed in prison where she starved to death. And he placed his 3 other brothers in prison except for one of them, Antigonus. Aristobulus got sick, forcing him to return home. His brother Antigonus returning home as well. Antigonus arrived in armor, just coming from battle. The queen knows how weak and defenseless her husband is, and paranoid, she conspires to the king. Psst. Yeah, your brother's gonna kill you. And when he arrives, showing off his nice new shiny armor, he's ambushed and killed. Yeah, that's cold, man. Come on, that's cold. Rumors can be deadly, Number 2. Vegas Getaway. Nice, roll those dice. It's one thing to party like a rock star, but to party like a prince? What does that even mean? I gotta keep this Prince Harry train going because, well, now I'm mad at him, but there's even more photos from history that show what was really going down in the royal family, His priorities, dare I say. After that party incident, just 7 years later, scandalous photos emerged from Harry's Las Vegas trip. Yeah, I had a little boys' night, it seems. It turns out what happens in Vegas may just leak online for your entire family to see, and your grandmother. That's probably not a great time. These scandalous pics were taken during a strip pool game. Lovely, we like that. Make sure you call the right pocket while you're not wearing any. The scandal actually prompted St. James Palace to contact the Press Complaints Commission before the snaps even made their way to British tabloids. Yeah, they knew right off the bat they were fucked. They're like, can we call them? Can we send a pigeon? What's the fastest? And finally, number 1, Boy Jones and other attempts. Okay, being the queen and all in history, a security team is always needed, obviously. And during her reign, specifically Queen Victoria, there were multiple attempts to harm the young queen. First attack was in 1840. It was an 18-year-old man named Edward Oxford, and he fired towards the Queen's carriage. When Edward was accused of high treason, of course, afterwards, he was actually found not guilty due to, you guessed it, insanity. A couple years later, in 1842, it happened again. This time, 2 men fired at her, both also missed. In 1849, her carriage was attacked by William Hamilton. In 1850, as the carriage was passing the gates of Buckingham Palace, Robert Pate, a retired soldier, might I add, ran up and hit her with his cane. Victoria was okay, luckily, but of course she was shook. Then these incidents kept occurring again in 1842, 1849, and 1872. Attempt after attempt after attempt. But then things got a little worse and, dare I say, a little bit more weird. If you haven't heard of Boy Jones or anything that happened there, I saved it for last because it's so horribly creepy. A teenager stalked the queen back in 1838 until 1841, and his name was Edward Jones. Edward Boy Jones. This guy somehow managed to break into Buckingham Palace more than once, right? Before Assassin's Creed came out, no idea how we thought of this. Guy just knows a route in, and he would break in and would hide under the queen's sofa. That was his go-to spot. Or he would sometimes just sit on her throne. And one of the worst things ever, sometimes he would go through her drawers. He would go through the queen's drawers. That's so gross. What? Like that's gross. He would steal her clothes until eventually and thankfully he got caught.
Number 10. What's yours is mine. Maintaining a dynasty and trying to rule over a people is hard. Many people have done it in the past, but if you notice, there isn't that many kingdoms left. So, it's no surprise that in Egypt, one of the largest and most successful civilizations of the ancient world and of all time, had some political strife. Berenice III had lost her husband Ptolemy, and she was doing her best to maintain power. In some serious Alabama energy, Ptolemy XI was made king, a stepson and half-brother. The man wanted it all to himself, and can you blame him? I mean, look at the pyramids. Nice, I'd want him too. He promptly unalived his new queen because power moves. Some people didn't like this, and in some form of poetic justice, he was unalived by the people. What's the lesson in this one? Maybe that you can't trust your strange, closely knit inbred family members? I'm not sure, honestly, but it's just messed up. Number 9. Double Trouble. This one isn't exactly about a king removing a queen like his wife, but it is about kings ceasing the life of their queen, more specifically their mother. Clyricus and Oxythris were the sons of Amistris, a woman handed off in marriage by the mad lad Macedonian himself, Alexander the Great. Well, like a lot of ye olde history, there was some power struggles. A power vacuum had been created in the death of Dionysus. You'd think that wouldn't happen over and over again, but You'll find that a lot in history. The power struggle was solved, and eventually Amystress retired and remarried. Named a town after herself. Things were okay for Amystress. Things were good. But one day her sons came to visit and noticed the Mon looked a little thirsty. So they drowned her in a river in a power grab that pretty much immediately backfired, as they too were unalived by the next guy in line. Pretty similar to the last story, but that's history, isn't it? Number 8. One too many. Sometimes when you're king, you're gonna have more than one wife that's 6 feet under. It's just how it goes sometimes. However, I believe there is no better example of this than Afzal Khan, whose actions were so egregious that I did a literal double take after learning about what this king had done. See, Afzal didn't just unalive one wife or a couple like history's favorite King Henry VIII. No, my busy bees. He is responsible for the termination of 63 wives, not wives. I'm not sure what kind of guy would make that kind of mistake. In fear of losing them to an invader who treated women slightly better, he had his soldiers give them a tall glass of drowning. Those who tried to escape were cut down without mercy. Yeah, I lived next door to the chief. He invited me in for a cup of tea. I sat down and he said, "That ain't it." You know something's messed up if I'm overusing that joke.
Number 7. A fateful turn of events. Queen Victoria. Her reign began back in 1837 and it lasted until the Queen's death in 1901. Now at just age 18, Alexandrina Victoria had to rise up to the throne. Had to, right? All these cases, it's like, yeah, they have to do this. She was born, of course, on May 24th, 1819, and Queen Victoria was actually 5th in line when she was born, nowhere near the throne. So right off the bat, it was actually highly unlikely that she would ever see the crown. But one by one, all of her family members began passing away fast. In 4 years, 3 of Victoria's cousins passed away, and then her father and her grandfather both died 1 week apart from one another. So on one hand, obviously it's sad, it's tragic, everyone's dealing with loss so fast. But on the other hand, by the time 1830 rolled around, Victoria was only 11 years old, and already she was next up to bat for the throne at 11. Imagine, that's like some ancient Egypt. Number 6, the Great Irish Famine. The Great Irish Famine took out many people. Back in 1845, potato crop that a lot of the Irish population relied on were suddenly no longer available. See, a group of microorganisms wiped them out, and in result, around 1 million folks died or had to leave. Now, it was draconian law and British ruling at this point that made the exported food hard to reach people. That's where things stopped. This famine led to Irish independence, of course, and anti-union movements, and the show Victoria pulled back 0 punches in 2017, where an episode showed the true happenings behind the Great Irish Famine and the role that Queen Victoria played in coming to the aid of her then subjects. It was the death of at least 1 million people. This was a very dark 7 years in Irish history. Historian Christine Keneally spoke out and says, quote, "There is no evidence that she had any real compassion for the Irish people in any way." Yikes. That's a historian saying that. That's how you know. Number 5, Meghan Markle, solo strut. Okay, back in May 2018, we all set our alarms, we woke up early, and we all watched the royal wedding, right? We sipped our tea in our pajamas and we pretended like we were there, right? Just watching, along with the other billions of people online. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, his new Duchess. At the historic wedding, Thomas Markle was just a no-show. Yeah, Meghan just walked down that aisle by herself in front of 1 billion people watching at home or streaming it, and it was thought at the time that this was because of Thomas's health. See, right before the wedding, Thomas suffered a heart attack, right? Just days before. So of course nobody was upset. It was almost expected for him not to show up. But cut to a year later, we began talking again. Thomas and the Duchess are now not close, it seems. Thomas even spoke out against his own daughter at one point. There was a huge scandal where Meghan even spoke to Oprah, like Oprah and that big tell-all, and Meghan actually said to her father, "If you tell me the truth about working with paparazzi, we can help." And he wasn't able to do that, and for me, has really resonated, especially now as a mother, end quote. So yeah, they're not talking, I guess, anymore, which more than fair. If my dad was working with the paparazzi, showing them private letters, I'd be a little pissed too. There's no way though, the guy can't even unlock his email, let alone sending one? No way. Number 4, Prince Charles and Princess Diana's divorce. Prince Charles, the oldest son of the Queen, straight up admitted to having an affair with Camilla Parker before his divorce from his first wife, of course, Princess Diana. Imagine having this is crazy. A princess? You cheated on a princess? That's insane. So in turn, Princess Diana addressed the relationship and what's happening during, you know, that famous 1995 interview with BBC. She couldn't have said it better, if I'm being honest. Diana said herself, quote, "Well, there's 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." Yeah, end quote. There's no better way of putting it, I think. That's a pretty baller way of saying it. I don't know. I haven't said baller in like 13 years, but I'm like, you know what? That's a baller move. It's pretty gangster. Diana also said she was in love with riding instructor Major James Hewitt during her marriage to Charles, so everybody was busy looking other directions, it seems. Diana and Charles divorced in 1996, only 1 year before her tragic car accident. Now later in 2005, Charles ended up marrying Camilla. Has anyone seen Spencer? Kristen Stewart looked great in that movie, and now I want to watch it. Is it worth the watch? Let me know in the comments. I didn't see it go to theaters or anything. It kind of snuck by me. I was sleeping on all the good ones.
Number 3, the Mayor's Alibi. Alright, here's a modern one for you. Yes, I know the mayor is not a king. I understand that. But they still hold a decent amount of power, and this happened in the 90s, which I hate to bring up because that was a really long time ago. Yeah, I know, right? I know, I remember that too. Mayor Barry Waite and his wife were just as comfy as peas and carrots when one day his wife was mysteriously unalived. Barry was not a suspect at first, but slowly as time went on, his alibi began to unravel, and he seemed less and less trustworthy. As multiple financial-based scandals were beginning to rear their heads, it later became understood that his wife was going to seek legal aid after learning about Barry's doings, strangling her in a fit of rage. Years later, he was convicted and sentenced to 40 years in prison, so maybe we haven't learned much from our historical past. A man in power in fear of losing it to a woman has removed her from the equation. I guess we'll never change. Number 2, one last ride. King Philip V was down bad. The CEO of Naughty Time. This man liked to get down and to be a certain kind of dirty. He could not get enough of women. He loved them, his wives and mistresses included. Reported to try and get the deed done at least 3 times a day. Now you might be saying to yourself, but Big Ched, what's so wrong with that? Everyone likes a little mooey once in a while. Hey, I hear you. A little toe curling once in a while, it's a great thing if you catch my drift. But Philip may have enjoyed it just a little too much, as when his beloved wife was on her deathbed, he tried to squeeze in one more D appointment. Your wife is dying and all you can think about is a little afternoon delight? A bouquet of flowers and I love you would have been fine, but who am I to judge? You go ahead. Weirdo. Number 1, the Last Czar. Nicholas II of the Romanovs was the last Czar of Russia. What did he do to his wife? Well, not much, actually, and that's the issue at hand. It's his inaction that hurt her and the family the most. You see, Russia was an interesting nation in the early 1900s. As most nations were modernizing, Russia was still somewhat stuck in the past. A lack of rights for anyone, no industry, and the monarch was kind of oppressive. Well, Nicholas the Tsar was going to change it. At some point, maybe. Okay, well, he didn't. It would take a whole history class to break down what actually happened during those crucial years, but in a nutshell, there was this new fun idea called communism. And with the lack of the Tsar's support to the people, this is serious neglect we're talking about here, the people revolted. The monarchy was overthrown, and in an event that's actually quite sad, the Tsar and his whole family were unalived by the new government. His inaction got his wife done in. Way to go, Nikki.
Number 10. Philippe the First. Louis XIV, one of the greatest kings of France in all of history, ruled for 72 years with the nickname as the Sun God. Dressed to the nines, Guy was classy. His rotten brother, however, yeah, not so much. Philippe the First, Duke of Orleans, the younger son of Louis XIII and Anna of Austria. Matter of fact, to dissolve future brotherly fights like their dad had, their mom actually raised Philippe as a girl so that there was no issue around succession time of who's gonna be the king. Philippe, raised under impression of being the future king's sister, understanding right away that there would be no discussion about who's exactly ruling. This was a new time, and surprisingly, people weren't really judgy about it. The king loved his family as well, and made sure that they were all taken care of, including his younger sister. Also, this led people to be a little bit more comfortable and loose with their sexuality in France at that time. Okay, these are all good. These are all wins. Starting off tame. Number 9. Prince John. Side note, if you did what we do here on Bumblebee, hit that thumbs up button, huh? Helps us out over on our end. Okay, now this John guy, aka John Lack Land. Yeah, he was nicknamed this his whole life by his father, Henry II. He was like, you're not gonna get any land? Ha, get it? John Lack Land! And here we begin the spoiled fight for the throne. And I kinda understand why, right? John, the youngest brother of the boys of Henry II, we had Henry the young king, he was the oldest and crowned first. No powers though, no, too young. Then we have the mighty Richard the Lionheart. Now this was like the quarterback all-state brother. Leading the crusades, everybody loved him, thousands of statues of this guy. ruled for more than 40 years. Then there was Geoffrey, not really suited to be a king, and after a couple rebellions, he wasn't really the favored one. Then, the last pick on the team, and the weasel, who had been teaming up and talking shit about the family since the beginning, John Lackland. Finally, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, huh? Number 8. Caracalla and Gita, 2 sons of Emperor Septimius Severus. This one's an interesting one. According to the will of their dying father, they were to both share power of the empire. And cue brothers being brothers. When Septimius died in 211, the brothers were proclaimed joint emperors to Rome, which was a failure instantly. The palace was divided into 2, and neither allowed commingling between friends or servants. The brothers decided to split the empire completely in half. One thing leads to another. Caracalla tried to murder Gita during a festival. Unsuccessful, of course. Their mother arranged then a peace meeting. And after a fake apology, he succeeded this time and killed his younger brother. And if that wasn't bad enough, then he tried to erase his brother's name from history. Like unchisel his name out of rocks. Like that's spoiled rotten for sure, right? That's mean.
Number 7. 20 years of therapy. Elizabeth of Bosnia was a very unpopular queen, and unfortunately had to often defend her throne with violence. As it turns out, this did not bode well. Many people wanted revenge, and honestly, just to take her position of power. Elizabeth, understanding perhaps her times might be numbered, was going to try everything she could to keep her bloodline in power. The passing of her king husband only made things worse. In her attempts to escape the impending doom, she was captured and imprisoned by her new owners. She was eventually released. Oh, did I say released? I meant as punishment she was strangled in front of her daughter. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm more of a bumbling fool, but that just can't be healthy for you. Emotional damage. Number 6. Bad divorce. Pedro of Castile was doing as the European monarchs do. Sometimes you gotta marry for alliances. Sure, it makes sense. Your kingdom is much less likely to get steamrolled by a larger kingdom if you have an alliance with a fellow kingdom or with a bigger one itself. Pedro of Castile, he married a young Blanche of Bourbon so France and Spain could just seem just a wee bit more snug. But Pedro just wasn't having it. What he was having instead was a mistress named Maria. So instead of enduring a loveless marriage, he had poor Blanche locked away in a tower. Just like Sleeping Beauty. Except a handsome prince wasn't coming to rescue this damsel in distress, but a man with a black hood and a sharpened axe, as Pedro had her unalived. I was gonna make a joke about Rapunzel and let down some hair so she could make an escape, but I mean, that's just awful really. I mean, imagine being locked up in a tower for a long time. Sure, I love the indoors, but you gotta let me out at some point, Chief. Do you think I can get a food delivery app up in that tower? Maybe. Number 5. Women's rights. Listen, it would be difficult to talk about this list without bringing it up. And ladies, all I want you to know is that you're gorgeous and I love you. But queens of the past, although they might be royalty, were severely lacking in rights. This is a time when men ruled, literally, and unfortunately that means a lot of women got the raw end of the deal. Just as an example, women have only been able to vote in the United States since 1920. There was a lot of work that had to be done, which sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. Women of the past, and especially the medieval world, basically needed a man to walk through their life, whether they liked it or not. Can't own property, business, can't sign contracts, basically everything they need to do has to go through their husbands first. Sure, royals had it easier, but I'd argue if someone could just unalive you or lock you away in a tower without consequence, do you really have rights at all to begin with? I don't know, I don't think so, that's not right. We're gonna do better, we'll do better. Number 4. Herod the Not So Great. Herod the Great was the king of Judea in 37 BC. Herod the Great was also a monster. I know I've given Henry VIII grief for Anne Boleyn, but Buddy here, he just throws out wives like it's his business. Well, it kinda was, actually. He was a busy man, having an estimated 14 children with different wives. There's also a good chance that there was more, being since that female births were just not recorded. He also unalived a lot of other people too. This guy was just so much of a tyrant that both Jewish and Christian faiths depict him as a tyrant. Way to go, dude. Nice.
Number 3. James the First, King of Scots from 1406 until his assassination in 1437. The youngest of 3 sons, he was born to King Robert III and Annabella Drummond. Again, we have a clear line of succession here. Oldest, then middle, then youngest, right? His older brother David died under suspicious circumstances during a detention by their uncle Robert, Duke of Albany, and now suspect to the crown. In 1406, James was forced to take refuge in Castle Basbrock, and his now king and older brother, Robert III, now dead from yet again another mysterious circumstance. Talk about a family of power-hungry snakes. Now leaving only the wee 11-year-old James, the uncrowned King of Scotland. Paranoid and fearing for his life against his murderous counsel, James now taken hostage by the British for 18 years as he grows up. After he comes home, paints himself up blue, and assassinates all of his enemies from childhood one by one. Well, almost. James was assassinated 1437 by his other uncle, Walter Stewart. Dude, what's going on here? Just uncles just killing their nephews left, right, and center? Classic. Number 2. James II and VII? James was King of England and Ireland as James II. He was also King of Scotland as James VII. Talk about spoiled much. Guy's got titles on titles and 37 names. You see, he got that second title from his now dead older brother, Charles II, or King Charles II. That's odd. He was the last Catholic monarch of England, Scotland, and Ireland. He's remembered over the principles of absolutism and the divine right of kings. See, James inherited the throne of England, Ireland, and Scotland from his brother due to the divine right of kings. Long story short, you had to be of the same blood to be royal. You needed to be appointed by God to be considered royal or family. The birth of James's first son and heir raised hell amongst his real firstborn daughter, Mary, and of course her husband, William III of Orange. It was only right for William of Orange to assume the English throne as king and her queen, cause, you know, the whole family bloodline thing. James said no out of selfishness, of course, and after he returned to France, he spent his life in exile, powerless. Hey, the rules are the rules here, James. There's an order of operations here, you know? Number 1. Ivan Ivanovich. Ivan was the second son of Ivan the Terrible. Yeah, that Ivan the Terrible. Raised beside his brother Fyodor, the young Ivan accompanied his father during the many massacres at the tender age of 15. Ivan was even said to have once saved his father from assassination attempt. A prisoner raised a sword against the Tsar, only to be repeatedly stabbed by his son. Talk about initiation, right? That's a father-son bonding moment right there. He grew up and, like all boys, thought he could run a tighter ship than dad. The relationship slowly deteriorated, and in 1581 the king, seeing his daughter-in-law unlawfully dressed, he hit her. Young Ivan rushed to his wife's defense and angrily confronted his father. Ivan's father struck him on the head with his scepter out of rage. Dad, realizing what he did, immediately threw himself over his son, crying out, "May I be damned, I've killed my son." His younger and unprepared brother, Fyodor, succeeded him as ruler, and after Fyodor's untimely death, Russia entered a period of uncertainty known as the Time of Troubles. Talk about a bad omen, huh?